motivation. So it's always good to come back to the fact that everybody wants happiness and not suffering equally. And everybody is equally worthy of happiness and the alleviation of suffering. Now our mind might come up with all sorts of reasons why that's not true. How we're better than others and so we're more worthy of happiness. How certain people don't behave properly so they're less worthy of happiness. They need to suffer and be punished. But we need to look closely at those ideas and see how biased they are, how shallow they are, how we're just looking superficially at other people's actions in this life and not really looking into their heart and seeing how much they're exactly like us. So when we look beyond the superficial and look into sentient beings' hearts, there's no way to say that one person is more worthy of happiness or one person is less worthy or that their suffering be alleviated. With a reasonable mind, we can't make that distinction. And so when we see this, it helps us to drop a lot of our judgmental, discriminating mind that falsely makes categories between people. And instead it really opens us up to quite a wonderful view of appreciation for all living beings and a deep respect and valuing of all human beings equally. And so that basis of equanimity towards all beings is really important for developing love and compassion. Otherwise, our love and compassion turns out to be very biased and thus unreliable. On top of that, when we consider the kindness of other living beings, we naturally want to repay it. And thinking deeply upon how best to repay their kindness, we conclude that it's through gaining the abilities of a fully awakened Buddha. And thus we generate bodhicitta, the wish to attain full Buddhahood for the benefit of all. And so with that as our motivation tonight, then we'll listen to the teachings. Is it on? I think it's on. Yeah? Is it recording okay? Off? I'll turn it on again. Okay. Huh? No, it was on. It's temperamental. Okay. So, this bit about the the judgmental mind is really something, isn't it? How it looks superficially at different beings and creates such huge differences, among them, so that we think some are more worthy and valuable on an ultimate level than others, and other living beings can be disposed of easily, collateral damage. Their lives don't really matter. And when we really look, we can see how superficial, how this judgmental mind is based on such a superficial way of looking at others. Depending upon how they treat me, how they relate to me, if they do what I want them to do, if they're attractive to me, if they're on my side, we can see that it's all really so biased, so subjective, and yet really, this is the way most of society makes decisions on who are friends, who's worthwhile, and so on, just looking superficially. And then also judging people according to certain traits, putting them in certain categories, and being prejudiced against everybody in that category with that certain trait. Or prejudice for everybody in a certain category with a certain trait. And really how it has very little to do, if anything to do, with who living beings really are. Which is, a living being that is merely designated in dependence upon a body and mind. So all that's there is the body and mind. There's no person with their real live personality that we can differentiate from everybody else. And all these living beings want to be happy and not suffer. So they come in different sizes and shapes, but those sizes and shapes are just the karmic bubble package that they're manifesting in this lifetime. It's not who they are. We're all kind of like karmic bubbles, aren't we? How we appear, our certain role, our certain appearance to others is just something created by causes and conditions, by our own karma. And it's a bubble because it's there and then it's gone. It doesn't last very long. This lifetime isn't very long. And then, the continuity of that consciousness goes on to the next life, and a different combination of karmas ripen, and a different karmic bubble appears that can be totally the opposite of the one that was here this life, with a very different personality, very different life form, very different, race, religion, who knows what. Can even be born as a kitty. So, making hard and fast discriminations among sentient beings really doesn't make any sense. And it's also very opposite to the Dharma mind that we're trying to create. We're trying to create a heart of love and compassion, but this mind that's always looking at everybody and saying, well, how do they relate to me? And what do I think about who they are? What do I think about what they're doing? We can see that all of that is so superficial and so changeable. So we let that go, and this is the front of the room, folks. We let that go, and we look into sentient beings' hearts and see that there's just living beings who want to be happy and don't want to suffer. And that's what's deep in our own heart. There's absolutely no difference. Okay? So this meditation, I think, is really very important to do over and over and over again. Because we know sooner kind of level the field in our own mind, then our habit of discriminating comes up. And we start, friend, enemy, stranger, more worthy, less worthy. So we have to again remind ourselves of it and even things out. Okay? But like I always say, it doesn't mean you treat everybody in the same way. Because, conventionally we have different roles. Conventionally people have different skills and abilities. So we may love everybody equally. We may have compassion for everybody equally. But we treat people different. Because you treat a toddler different than you treat an adult. Yeah, it's as simple as that, isn't it? Yeah, you don't treat a toddler and an adult the same way. It's not going to work. And you don't treat your boss the same way as you treat your husband or your wife. That's not going to work either. Okay, so there's different conventional societal roles that we go by. But in our heart, we can still care for everybody equally. So very important to remember that. Bring it to mind again and again and again. And initially, sometimes we're shocked by it. We feel a little bit threatened by it. But if I don't have this group of friends who knows who I am, who are special to me and who I am special to, then who in the world am I going to be? And then also for the people who define themselves in terms of who they dislike, if they let go of all this kind of prejudice and discrimination, then how are they going to define themselves? Because there are people, who define themselves by who they don't like and who their enemies are. And all of a sudden these people are like, they have an identity crisis. Yeah. Well, it's a good kind of identity crisis. Because why are we creating an identity based on who we don't like? That's really not so good, is it? And yet lots of people do that. Yeah, whole nations, whole ethnic groups. Lots of people do that. Yeah. So it's quite suffering provoking. So let's drop that. Okay, so let's go back to our text here. There's a few small things about objects I want to continue, and then I want to get into the 7 types of cognitions. Okay, so so just to review that functioning things, conditioned phenomena are according to the Sautantrikas here, are the objects of direct perceivers, and permanent things are the object of conceptions. Okay? And if something is an established base, in other words, if it's an existent object, it's not necessarily an appearing object for both a direct cognizer and conception. Okay, but an established base is necessarily an apprehended object of a conception, because whatever exists is necessarily realized by conception. Okay? So if something is an existent object, it's not necessarily an appearing object for both a direct cognizer and a conception. For example, what's an example of something that exists that is not an appearing object for both a direct perceiver and a conception? Okay, first of all, what are the objects of direct perceivers are what? Appearing objects of direct perceivers are what? Yeah, and I just mentioned it 2 minutes ago. Functioning things. Okay, so first of all, if you're looking for something that's going to be the object, the appearing of an object of both a direct perceiver and a conception, you're going to have to eliminate functioning things, aren't you? Because they're the appearing objects of direct perceivers. Okay? So then you're left with permanent things. Okay? So are permanent things an established base? What is an established base? I just said it. What's an established base? I just said it in this teaching 1 minute ago. What? An existent object. Okay, are permanent things an established base? Yes. Okay, are they an object of a direct perceiver? No. Are they an object of conception? Yes. So are they an illustration of something that is an established base, but not an object, an appearing object to both a direct perceiver and a conception? Yes. Okay, so what is an example of an object that is an established base that is not the appearing object of a direct perceiver and a conception? What?
The way we have this defined in this system, permanent object isn't an object for both, and an impermanent object isn't an object for both.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah, but it says here an established base is necessarily an object is necessarily an apprehended object of conception, right? Who looked over their notes between last week and this week? 2, 3 people? That's it? Should we continue class or not? Because you don't seem to be, you seem to have forgotten what we've covered before. Okay, let's try this again. If something is an established base, it is not necessarily an appearing object for both direct perceivers and conception. Okay? Because we know that impermanent things are not appearing objects for conception, and permanent things are not appearing objects for direct perception. But an established space is necessarily an apprehended object of conception, because whatever exists is necessarily realized by conception. Okay, all existent things are realized by conception. Okay, so what's an apprehended object? Yeah, so it's the object that the consciousness is getting at. Okay, what's the appearing object? Yeah, the object that's appearing to that consciousness. Okay. You can't understand emptiness without at least knowing the difference between these two. Yeah. Because that's the whole thing what Jeffrey's saying, on our Tuesday class, that objects appear truly existent. Yeah. Yeah, but when we're grasping at true existence, we're apprehending them as truly existent. But it's an incorrect consciousness when we do that. Okay, but they can still the appearing object. Yeah, they can still appear truly existent, and they're mistaken in that way. Yeah. And when we apprehend them as the apprehended object as a truly existent one, then it's an erroneous consciousness. Okay. But we can also apprehend an object without apprehending it as truly existent, without the apprehended object being a truly existent one. For example, when we don't have any strong emotions in our mind and we're just looking and saying that's a staircase, this is a carpet. Okay, things like that. So it's important to do this, and I'm really expecting you, if we're going to continue with this series, that people really put some energy into it and review their notes, that after the teaching you go back and you review it and you study it and discuss it, and then before the Thursday teaching you review your notes, because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere, and in that case it's useless for me to teach this topic. Okay. Okay, now there's another way of talking about things. We can also say that even if something is an object of conception for the particular conception that apprehends it, it is not necessarily a conceptual object in general. Okay, so they're making some distinctions here. At first, all these things sound very confusing, but as you get into the whole philosophy, you'll find this happening a lot. So it's important that you learn to listen to these kinds of distinctions. Okay? So we can say that even if something is the object of conception for a particular conception that apprehends it, okay, it is not necessarily a conceptual object in general. Okay, so let's look at a particular conception that apprehends something. So what is the object of a particular, we're talking focal object here. What is the focal object of a conception of an apple? Huh? I said the focal object, the apple. Okay, so that's the apple. Is it a conceptual object in general? Because all existence are objects of conception. So is it the apple a conceptual object in general? Yes.
I don't understand because I don't feel like I guess I'm confused about the word existent.
Okay, an existent is something that is perceived by or perceivable by mind. Okay, it's something that exists.
I think when I hear the word existent, I confuse it with conception or inherently existent.
Yeah. No, I'm just talking about existent. Okay. Is a mustache of a turtle existent? No. Is an apple existent? Is an apple an established base? Yes. Huh? Yeah, an established base and existent are synonymous. Yeah. Are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq an established base? No. Okay. Are they an object of conception? Yeah, they sure were an object of conception. But they weren't an object of conception in general, because only established spaces are objects of conception in general. But they were the object of conception for the particular conception apprehending weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Okay, are you getting the difference we're saying? So a particular conception, yeah, the object of that we can say may be a non-existent thing. Okay, but that doesn't make it an object of conception in general, because, yeah. What? Well, yeah, objects of conception in general are existent things. Yeah. So, okay. For example, the horn of a rabbit is not a conceptual object in general because it's not suitable to be an object of mind. It is not an object of knowledge. Nevertheless, we can say that rabbit's horn is the conceptual object for the particular conception that apprehends it. Okay. So when you're really angry at somebody, yeah, the person that you've painted in your mind that's so awful, is that person an existent or not? No, the person that you've painted in your mind doesn't exist. Certainly not like that. This awful, terrorizing person that you're dreadfully afraid of. Yeah. That doesn't exist. Is that an object of conception in general? No. Why not? Because it doesn't exist. Is it an object of the conception that apprehends, this horrible, dreadful person? Yes. Okay. Okay. This horrible, dreadful person that you're seeing when you're angry, that's the object of a conception, that's holding on, a conception of that horrible, existent person. But it's not an object of conception in general. It's an object of conception of that particular conception.
When you have an object of conception in general, it's something that everybody has named the same thing, like the apple, the tree.
Yeah, it's something that exists. Yeah.
Does the word particular have any particular meaning?
Well, it's because you're talking about that particular cognizer. So the mind, that is thinking about, this horrible person who's going to come get me, or this fantastic person who's going to save me.
But can it also be an apple?
Oh yeah, an apple is a conceptual object of the particular conception apprehending apple. But here what we're getting at is something can be an object of a particular conception that apprehends it, but not be an object of conception in general. Okay? Okay. Then a vase can appear to the conception apprehending vase, but we don't say that vase is the appearing object of that conception. Why not? Yeah, the conceptual appearance of a vase is the appearing object to that. Okay? Okay, so it's very, Okay. A vase, or an apple can appear to the conception apprehending apple. But we do not say the apple is the appearing object for that conception. Yeah. Is it the focal object? Is it the focal object? Yeah. Is it the focal object Is it the apprehended object of that conception? Yes. It's apprehending apple, isn't it? Okay. And then here's something that's interesting. So in the case of permanent space is both the appearing object to the conception apprehending it and the conceptual appearance of space is also the appearing object to that conception apprehending it. Okay, because remember, conception can apprehend permanent objects, so the conception can apprehend space. Or the appearing object to that conception can be space. I goofed up. The appearing object of a conception is a permanent thing. So when you have the both space can be the appearing object to a conception, and the conceptual appearance of space can be the appearing object to a conception. Okay. So are non-existence objects of mind? No. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're not. Okay. So a sky flower and a horn of a rabbit are not to be known as objects because they are not able to be cognized by mind. They cannot be realized by a mind, and they are not imputed by conception. Okay, they're totally non-existent. If they were imputed by conception, they would be objects of conception, and they would have to exist. They don't exist. Nevertheless, we have to say that they are objects for the particular conception that apprehends them. Okay? So here we specified that if something is an object for a particular mind that apprehends it, it is an object for that conception. But in general, it is not an object of conception. Okay? That's what we just went over. Okay? Rabbits do not have horns, but a mind that thinks it sees a horn on a rabbit at a distance is a rabbit, okay, but for a mind that thinks it sees, a horn on a rabbit at a distance, a rabbit's horn is the conceived object of that conception. Okay, conceived object of that conception, but it's not a conceived object in general. Okay. Now here we're getting into something that is one of the Satantrical tenets that's quite different than Prasangika. Okay, because in Prasangika you can have direct perception of emptiness. Okay, is emptiness permanent or impermanent? Yet you can have a direct perception of emptiness. Okay. So did you see the difference there? Yeah, there's a big difference. Because remember we said that permanent things for Satantrika are objects of only conception and not direct perception. Okay. But emptiness in the Prasangika system is an object of direct perception. Then what about the selflessness of persons for the Satantrika? Yeah? Huh?
Because your essence says in his book that they have the conception afterwards,
Yeah.
in their subsequent cognition.
No, indirect. Indirect, okay? So the selflessness of person is an object, yet it is not realized directly by a direct perceiver for Satantrikas. Okay? direct perceivers do not realize the selflessness of persons directly, okay, nor do valid inferences. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? For the Satantrikas, that neither a valid inference nor or a direct perception realizes selflessness. That seems quite strange. Okay, hold on. This means that a yogi does not realize the selflessness of persons through its appearance to a direct perceiver. It seems that it should, but it does not. Okay? So, let's see. So, well, I'll just read here what he says. If we ask, isn't there any direct perceiver that realizes the selflessness of person directly? The answer is yes, there is, but the yogic direct perceiver does not. It only realizes the selflessness of person indirectly through the appearance of the abstract factor. Remember that category of phenomena? The abstract factor that is the lack of self-existence of the person. This abstract factor is simply the fact that the self changes moment by moment. It is the subtle impermanence that exists within the person. When a yogic direct perceiver realizes the selflessness of person, this abstract factor appears, and the yogic direct cognizer realizes the selflessness of persons implicitly. Okay? Even though it is a non-conceptual mind. Yeah, they talk about the aspect appearing, okay? But what they're saying here is that when somebody is realizing selflessness, what the appearing object actually is the impermanence of the aggregates. Yeah, so the impermanence of the aggregates is appearing. And remember, impermanence was an abstract composite? Yeah. So on the basis of that abstract composite, the impermanence of the aggregates appearing, then the selflessness of persons is known implicitly, not directly. Okay? The impermanence of the objects, of the aggregates, is the appearing object, because you're meditating very deeply with a yogic direct perceiver, really refining your mindfulness so that you can begin to see the moment by moment arising and ceasing of different things. But that's a yogic direct perceiver. Yes, but impermanence isn't a permanent object. Impermanence is impermanence is an abstract composite. It's impermanent.
No, so how could a direct perceiver see it if they only see the
Direct cognizers cognize. They see the impermanent things, right? So they're seeing. Yeah, they see the impermanent things. Yeah. Okay, so they're seeing the impermanence of the aggregates, which is an abstract factor. And on the basis of the aggregates appearing impermanent and them apprehending the impermanence of the abstract, of the aggregates, then implicitly they know that there is no substantial self in those aggregates. Okay? So that's how they perceive selflessness, how they describe it. Yeah. And so it's different, you know. And I remember at one of the Mind Life conferences, Sharon Salzberg was there, and His Holiness asked her about this, you know. because she meditates in the Theravada tradition, and she said, yeah, that's what they say, that when you realize selflessness, what's actually appearing to the mind is the impermanence of the aggregates. Yeah, but what you're apprehending is that there's no self of persons in the aggregates. Implicitly, you're implicitly knowing that. Okay, so it's very different than prasangika, isn't it? Yeah, because not only the object of negation is different, but how you know that object is different. Because in prasangika, you can directly know emptiness. Yeah, quite different, isn't it? Okay. Then, okay, let's skip that one for right now. Okay, then they talk a little bit about object possessors. This is another kind of, we just got done talking about objects, so then another topic is object possessors. So an object possessor or subject is defined as a functional thing that possesses an object of any kind. Okay. So the Tibetan term for subject is yul chen. Yul is object and chen is to possess. So an object possessor or a subject. The word subject in English is very has so many different meanings, because sometimes we use the word subject as synonymous with object. Yeah, like, don't we? The subject of the talk is XYZ. We can just as easily say the object that they were talking about is XYZ. So the word subject is a kind of tricky word in English here. Okay, but here we're using it to refer to the object possessor. So there's three kinds of object possessors: a person, a consciousness, and an expressive sound. Okay, so a person is a being imputed upon a collection of 4 or 5 aggregates. Yeah, so this holds true for all of the schools. Yeah. All beings from the peak of cyclic existence to the lowest hell are persons designated upon their particular collection of aggregates. Yeah. So the beings in the desire realm and form realm are designated in dependence on 5 aggregates. The beings in the formless realm on 3 aggregates. 4 aggregates. What aggregate are they missing? Body. Okay? So then synonyms for the person are self, I, and being. These are all synonyms of person. However, what is very tricky is the word self has different meanings in different situations. So sometimes self refers to the person. Sometimes self refers to the object of negation, like in the term the self of persons or the selflessness of persons. There the word self is not referring to the person. It's referring to what is being negated. Okay? So objects possessed by a person, because we said that a person is an object possessor. So objects possessed by a person are the different kinds of knowledge, such as worldly skills, and also material possessions. Okay? Because we say, what does a person possess? They possess a body, they possess a mind, they possess knowledge, they possess, a sofa, whatever it is. Okay? So a person is an object possessor. And illustrations of the person, or we might say an example of a person. So the definition of person was a being who's designated, in dependence on the aggregates. So what is an example of a person? Okay, we would say you, me, a cat, a dog, a teacher, a policeman. Okay, an animal. So, a monk, a nun, all of these are persons. Okay. Then consciousness is the second kind of object possessor, and consciousness is defined as that which is clear and knowing. Or another translation, same Tibetan words, is luminous and aware. Yeah. So depending who's translating it, you'll hear it differently. Okay. So consciousness has three synonyms. One is mind. There the Tibetan word is sem, as in semke. Second one is cognizer, or rigpa, but this is not the rigpa that Dzogchen people talk about. And the third is awareness, or the Tibetan is lo. Okay. And so consciousness can be divided in various ways. It can be divided into prime or reliable cognizers, and then non-prime or unreliable cognizers. Mind can also be divided into virtuous and non-virtuous and neutral, can be divided into correct and incorrect. It can be divided in terms of primary consciousnesses and mental factors. So there's many different ways to divide mind, but mind is also a subject or an object possessor. And then the third kind of object possessors are expressive sounds, because they're going to be explained later, but they possess the object that they're expressing, because they're referring to a meaning of something. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the kinds of object possessors. So one kind, okay. Well, first let's just list the 7 types of cognizers, and then we'll get into some other labels of cognizers, okay? So just the 7 cognizers in general: direct perceivers, okay, inferences. Remember Jeffrey was saying the other time that an inference is a consciousness, but in one particular passage he was reading, it was referring to an argument. Yeah, but it's usually an inference is a consciousness. Okay, third one is subsequent cognizer. Fourth is a correct assumption or correct assumer. Fifth is an inattentive cognizer, or an inattentive mind, maybe. Sixth is doubt, and seventh is a wrong consciousness. Okay, and then some of those have different subdivisions. Okay, then there's also this thing called, a valid cognizer. So sometimes it's translated, for the Sautantrikas, it's translated as prime cognizer or as ideal cognizer. Okay, and the Sautantrikas have a special definition for it. So it's a cognizer that is new and incontrovertible. No, that's not one of the 7. Actually, I don't even know if in Tibetan they say 7, if they have the term 7 types of cognizers. I should find out. But anyway, okay, this is a kind of cognizer too. Yeah, and some of those 7 are subcategories of a reliable cognizer. Okay, so here they're defining it as a cognizer that's new and incontrovertible. So new, because the Sanskrit term is pramana, so the Sautantrikas gloss pra as new. the Prasangikas gloss pra as main. Yeah. Okay, so they're going to come up with different meanings for them. Okay, so new excludes subsequent cognizers. Okay, because we're saying that it's a new and incontrovertible mind. So subsequent cognizer is like the second moment of cognizing an object. So it's not new. So they're saying that that's not a reliable mind. Okay? Okay. So, because a subsequent cognizer is a mind that realizes an object after it has already been realized. Okay? So prime cognizers, or reliable cognizers, for the Sautantrikas, have a quality of originality by which they arise, whereas subsequent cognizers are induced by the force of this initial cognizer. In other words, the first moment you see the bell, it's something new, or the first moment you hear the bell, it's something new. That's a reliable cognizer, or prime cognizer. But the second moment you're apprehending it, it's no longer new. Okay? So they're saying that's not as reliable because you're apprehending it, not something new, you know, on the basis of its own qualities, but because you've already apprehended it before. Okay? So prime cognizers have this quality of originality, whereas subsequent cognizers are induced by the force of this initial cognizer. So you have first the prime cognizer, then the next moment you have the subsequent cognizer. Okay. The Prasangikas assert that a prime cognizer does not need to realize its object freshly or newly, okay, because they take the Sanskrit syllable pra to mean main and mana to mean comprehend. So thus they say pramana means that which is incontrovertible with regard to its main object, whereas the Sautantrikas is incontrovertible, you know, regarding a new object. So for Prasangikas, subsequent cognizers are also reliable cognizers. Okay? So incontrovertible means like it can't be changed to something else. So that excludes, what does it exclude? Is a wrong consciousness incontrovertible? Well, yeah, it's, yeah, it's, yeah, maybe it's incontrovertibly wrong. Okay. Okay, but incontrovertible primarily excludes correct assumption, because a correct assumption assumes, you know, it has the correct idea, but it's not certain about that idea. It's not certain about the object it's apprehending. And if somebody else comes along, they can inject some doubt, or they can inject some wrong, you know, a wrong understanding or something like that. Okay, so an example of a correct assumer is the thought that thinks sound is impermanent but is not certain. Okay, so you're assuming, yeah, or you're assuming or presuming, oh yeah, I heard sound is impermanent, that sounds good. Yeah, but it's not totally certain. Okay, so the thought that this thought is controvertible, and so it is not a prime cognizer. Okay, correct assumption is controvertible because it's not completely certain about the status of the object. Yeah, and so for a lot of us, for most of us, when we hear, oh, phenomena are empty of true existence, we say, and we hear a little, you know, explanation, we go, yeah, but that sounds okay. Yeah, they don't have any existence from their own side. Yeah. So that's a correct assumer. Even we say, oh yes, the person, me, I am empty of true existence because of being a dependent arising. So we're giving the form of a syllogism. Okay. Do we have an inference of that? No, we have a correct assumer. Yeah, we studied that. Oh yeah, sure, a person's a dependent arising. If it's a dependent arising, it's got to be empty. Yeah, that sounds good. I believe that. Yeah. But if somebody comes along and presents another object, they'll talk us into thinking that the person is truly existent. Yeah, an inference is incontrovertible. Okay. So that's why, when Jeffrey was talking about the meaning of emptiness is emptiness is the meaning of dependent arising. Okay. Why that only holds true for somebody who has realized emptiness? Because realize means you know it incontrovertibly, either through an inference or through a direct perceiver. Okay? So, in order to understand that emptiness is the meaning of dependent arising, you have to have had at least an inference, knowing, that something, that phenomena lack true existence because they're dependent arisings. Okay? Yeah. So that's why we haven't ascertained that emptiness is the meaning of dependent arising. Yeah. In fact, we may not even have a correct assumer of that. Yeah? We may just be sitting there going, what does that mean? I don't get what he's saying. Yeah. And then we might get to the thing of, well, yeah, or first of all, we'll start out with saying, well, no, emptiness isn't the meaning of dependent arising. Yeah, because dependent arising things exist. And if it exists, it can't lack true existence. True existence, emptiness of true existence is non-existence. We'll have that idea at the beginning. So that is what? That's a wrong consciousness. Okay. Then we'll get to, well, maybe things are empty of true existence. Maybe, but I don't really think so. Emptiness is the meaning of dependent arising. That becomes doubt. Okay. But we're still inclined towards the negative, the wrong conclusion. Then we keep hearing this same thing again and again, replaying Jeffrey telling us again and again and again and again. All of our teachers saying it again and again, and then we get to a correct assumer, and we go, oh yeah, things sounds right that things are empty because they're dependent arising, that emptiness is the meaning of dependent arising. That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I kind of get it. Yeah, but all that needs is for somebody to come along and say, like the question I was saying, well, but if that's true, then why doesn't it hold for somebody who hasn't realized emptiness? Which shows that I didn't really understand what he was talking about. Okay? So you can shake that. And then you go to an inference, yeah, which is a conceptual understanding, knowing, let's say, emptiness by the reason of dependent arising. And then in the prasangika, then you keep meditating on it, and then you're going to realize emptiness with a direct perceiver. Okay? So incontrovertible, we're out of time here. Okay, let's just do this anyway. Incontrovertible excludes presumption. Okay? So we talked about that. And it's also a cognizer, because remember, it's a new incontrovertible cognizer. So cognizer excludes a physical sense base, such as the eye organ, from being a prime cognizer. And that's because, according to the Vaibhasikas, the eye organ is a prime cognizer because it sees the objects existing in reality. Yeah. So the Vaibhasikas will say that your eye organ, not the gross eyeball, but the subtle things, you know, cones and rods and things, they'll say that that is a valid cognizer because they see the object. But Satantrikas say no, you know, it's the consciousness that sees the object, and the organ, you know, or the sense power is just what facilitates that. Okay. All consciousnesses of a Buddha are prime or valid or reliable cognizers. And Buddha is a reliable person, or a valid person that all beings can rely on. And his speech is also reliable. Okay. But his speech is not a reliable cognizer because his speech is sound. And it's not a cognizer. Okay. Okay, and then we say that there's two types of reliable cognizers. This is according to Satantrika. The prime direct, or the reliable direct cognizer, and then the reliable inference, or inferential cognizer. So let's stop. Yeah. Oh, I've been reading off of a transcription of Khensur Jampa Tekchok's teachings given at Nalanda some years ago. Yeah. I haven't been, maybe we should look at the text Mind in Tibetan Buddhism. It might have the root text that they teach this off of. Yeah, I didn't see it in the library last time I looked, but it might have the root text. We should see. Say hello to Jonathan, my tree. She's wagging her tail. Uh-huh.
Objects possessed by a person, knowledge, material possessions, mind and body. Does the consciousness have objects possessed by consciousness? Would it be insights and imagination?
Sure, or you know, the object possessed, or calling a consciousness an object possessor means that a consciousness perceives objects. So, you know, the subject is an eye consciousness. The object, the subject is an eye consciousness apprehending yellow. Yeah. What's the object that it possesses? Yellow. That's the object. It knows that object, okay? Yeah. Yeah. Sounds are would be the objects possessed by auditory consciousness.